Cities are to people like stars are to atoms. So this gives rise to a very powerful dynamic, just like a star, by the way, where a star kind of wants to collapse to a singularity from the point of view of gravity, and then it's pushing against the electromagnetic force that prevents the atoms from getting any closer together than they can, and that gives you the dynamic of a star. Cities have the attractor of wanting to get more people in the city to increase the wealth and innovation, and it's facing the repulsor of, for example, people have physical bodies, so they have to be in space. There's only so many people you can pack into a particular piece of space. Or giving them food. There's only so much food you can produce in the city. If you're producing the food out of the city, you've got transportation. So if you can only walk, for example, then there's only so far you can bring food and water, and also moving waste out of the city as constraints. And so what we see is a seeking on the part of cities to maximally use the technology that is available to them to overcome the limitations or the constraints of physical bodies, to pack as many human beings as possible into cities to thereby get this superlinear growth in wealth and innovation and other characteristics. And then effectively running into the limits of that. The Romans could build aqueducts, but the Babylonians couldn't build aqueducts. They had a limit. When we invented the elevator, some of them could go up past 3 or 4 floors, where people could reasonably walk on stairs, and suddenly build skyscrapers and pack a lot more people into the same space. Okay, next piece. This piece is, by the way, substantially more, let's call it theoretical. You create fragility. The city is endeavoring to bring as many people into it. Notice that as it brings more people in, it gets more wealth and it gets more innovation. So it has the capacity to just trying to figure out how to solve problems. So again, there was a point at which Rome couldn't bring enough water in, but they could figure out how to build aqueducts. They build these aqueducts and pull water from hundreds of miles away to be able to continue to support the population. Now here's the proposition. The proposition is effectively the entire population of a region is composed of the city and its support infrastructure. And so the hypothesis is that the city is trying to get as many people as possible into the center. And literally everything that isn't in the center is just support infrastructure. So if you look at the contemporary Western world in particular, you see something that looks like that. You've got giant cities that have sort of evaporated the population out of their local environment, created sort of population deserts, except for the location that can provide support infrastructure. And in some cases, that support infrastructure has to do with locations where people who really don't want to be in cities can still be. And then what happens is that the dynamic of packing more and more people and pushes it to the limit, which means that it's optimizing for the capacity to increase the number of people in the city, which means that it's becoming fragile. Logistics gets as intense as it can. Food distribution gets as intense as it can. Water distribution gets as intense as it can. And you're also running into situations where, by the way, things like crime and disease also tend to increase super linearly. So you have to build techniques to try to reduce that vis-a-vis innovation, like innovation, wealth, or fighting against crime and disease. And so minor perturbation, as the system becomes more and more optimized for maximizing population under particular constraints of technology, and boom, you get a collapse. And then that collapse creates a collapse of the entire civilization. So by hypothesis, for example, I would propose that the collapse of the Roman Empire was in some very distinct sense the actual collapse of the city of Rome, and everything else was support infrastructure. Now that's a pretty bold claim, and I don't necessarily need to hang my hat too much on that last piece, but the key idea here is city, attraction, repulsion, dynamic as being fundamental to the nature of civilization.